40 contenders, 7 rounds. The road to the Coke Series ends here.
fans, and welcome to iRacing's coverage of the third race of the 2023 eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series live for the virtual Phoenix Raceway in Avondale, Arizona. James Pike here alongside Blake McCann. Listen, Blake, the storyline to start off this Contender Series in 2023 has been all about the speed of Vicente Salas and Caden Honeycutt, and tonight we may see that continue because we come to the track where Vicente won in this very series 1 year ago.
And there hasn't been a lot of change since kind of that year ago when we were running here at Phoenix. And we've seen Salas, Honeycutt, a couple of those dead zone cars be so competitive these first couple of races. And that's usually a trend that continues. When somebody has a good start in the Contender Series, very often we see that continue to progress throughout the schedule. So certainly so, Vicente Salas is going to be one to watch tonight and could virtually, I don't want to say lock himself in, but put himself in an almost insurmountable points advantage at this juncture.
Here's a look at the ladder, the Road to Pro for the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series. Coke Series sits at the pinnacle. We are in the Contender Series, where it's those who finish 21st or lower in Coke Series points when the season combined with the top 20 from the eNASCAR qualifying iRacing Series, who competed in between February and September, running sort of adjacent to the same schedule that the Coke Series did in the vehicles of the NASCAR Craftsman Truck Series. So we're almost closing in on halfway to Contender. Once we finish up next week, when we get to Darlington, the halfway point of that race will be the halfway point of the entire Contender Series, and we've got some really, really tough tracks to close out the schedule, Blake.
It is, and it's hard to build momentum at this time of the year, James. Again, Road to Pro, the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series, they run in 2-week increments. This small period of time, you could see every single week there's a brand new track for these drivers to try and go to. Less time during the week for these drivers to work on the next race that's on the schedule. And at this point, James, I don't know if they like looking at that graphic beforehand. There's a lot of drivers, maybe some that are on our screen right now, that aren't so worried about having to look back and maybe think I might be running a truck next year. But you can take a look at the standings right now. Mind you, this is with the drop already through 2 races. That's why you can see Honeycutt and Salas, by virtue of their wins, they have 40 points. So we're already taking that drop into consideration. Going to see a little bit of changing, especially after tonight, since we'll be in our third race. But if you're on the flip side here, James, on this part of the graphic, you're generally in a good spot right now. Just need to go out and have some solid runs here these next couple of weeks, and you should be in good shape. But this is, James, where you don't want to be for obvious reasons, but it's very, very difficult, especially if you're on the right side of this screen. Look at drivers like Justice, like Buttafuoco, Caden Rush, and on down. These are drivers through 2 races with a drop are already in a very difficult point scenario.
Joey Brown may be the standout name out of everyone here. Remember, he won the Contender Series. He finished highest in the point standings in this series 1 year ago and got his way into the Coke Series. Didn't have the luck. He won it in the Coke Series this season, and now is dead last in Contender points and is going to need an incredible run through these final 5 races. Let's take a look at tonight's eNASCAR track analysis. And Blake, tell us a little bit more about Phoenix Raceway.
Well, this is a place where championships are settled now in eNASCAR. It's one where Tucker Minter was able to lock his place into the championship for this year, and tonight going to play host here to the eNASCAR Contender Series. And so much has changed with this facility over the years. It's been roughly over 2 years when this facility, as it stands now, where the start-finish line, which would have been exiting turn 4 turn 2 rather, a while ago, is now the front straightaway, kind of where that dogleg is. But James, that's exactly what we have to talk about. This dog leg and those restarts are going to be so crucial as you go down into 1 and 2. A lot of different lanes that you can run at that end of the racetrack, especially here in these NASCAR Xfinity Series cars. In 3 and 4, we've seen a lot of crazy moves and a very unique restart zone here at this track. That's one thing the drivers have to keep their eye on.
At the front, you'll see drivers try and use the high lane. In the back, you'll see a lot of tight quarters racing. This track narrows up very, very quickly. Here's a look at what happened in the 2023 eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series event at the virtual Phoenix Raceway back in September. Lots of action throughout the field that all set up a series of late race restarts where Tucker Minter was able to get the victory, Blake, but not without a tremendous fight.
No, especially not. And this is likely what we're going to see, I think, a lot of off of turn 2. Very difficult here at Phoenix to try and make some moves aside from restarts. So getting getting track position and being able to make those moves through the dogleg is going to be so important. And how this kind of funnels off of turn 2 towards the outside wall, and the fact that this back straightaway, James, walls are very condensed. We talk about how much space there is in the dogleg and that we can see 7 or 8 wide here, and that's not an issue. It's the exact opposite on the back stretch. It's a self-cleaning race, not a self-cleaning racetrack, if you will.
Lots of different lines that you can take through turn 2 as well, and you can see it here. Cars going 3 and 4 wide, but apexes can cross over, and you can end up with issues there. Same thing in the dogleg, where you can fan out to in theory about 8 or 9 wide, but then you have to get back to essentially 2 wide to make the run through 1 and 2. Here's some of the battling that we saw between Tucker Minter and Casey Kerwin. Remember, Tucker stayed out on old tires and was able to get enough restarts and get enough short green flag runs of a lap or 2, while the field wrecked behind him, that he was able to maintain the race lead. It was a huge gamble, but it was one that ultimately put him into the championship 4, Blake.
Well, again, many of these drivers that you see that were competing in this Coke Series, you kind of have to make a little bit of an adjustment period. We know these next-gen cars, the next NASCAR Xfinity Series cars that we'll be competing with tonight are drastically different in terms of how you have to drive them, the amount of speed you can carry through the center of the corner, how much yaw that you can put out in these race cars. So these Coke drivers kind of have to take a little bit of a step back. Not going to be as much dirty air. You're going to be able to maneuver through the corners a little bit, have some more options in terms of the lanes you want to run. But at the end of it all, you could look like Tucker Minter here and be in a good spot to perhaps be back in the Coke Series in 2024.
Vicente Salas will like to be back in victory lane tonight, just as he was a year ago in the Contender Series here at Phoenix. And this is our eNASCAR race analysis. 110 laps, 110 miles, just south of 180 kilometers. But the big number on that screen, Blake, your pit window, 55 to 60 laps. So you're going to have to pit once. But when you make that pit stop, especially if this race goes green, can be very critical in determining where you end up at the end of the night.
And depending on how much you lift, you can really save probably a little bit more than that, too. And I think we're going to start to see at kind of this point in the series, James, that some of those drivers that are struggling with points, that don't have a good qualifying run, that they're going to have to start to look for ways to differentiate themselves from the rest of the field, looking for strategies, looking for ways to maybe pit early or pit late, just to try to do something different, because at this juncture, 3 races in, it's a really tough road to climb out of.
It can be very difficult if you're towards the back. But at this time, it's time to bring you the starting grid and tell you where your favorite driver begins here. Jonathan Delaney with the fast time for Rise Esports and Lockdown Racing, 26.486 seconds, starting alongside Dylan Alt, Ryan Luza, Zach Nomak, a pair of former Coke Series champions in the second row, Taylor Hurst and Joey Brown, both former Coke Series drivers in row 3.
Further on back here, Agnell Phillip, a great run for him. Same with Eddie Kerner. We talked about Salas at the top of the show. Going to be on the inside of row 10. Keister definitely needs a good run here tonight. He's been struggling a little bit, but Scott and Bias, row 6, 2 drivers that have been really strong thus far.
Derek Bordeaux, Brian LaPrade, row 7, Brian Mercurio, and Derek Justice. Justice, we know, needs a big run tonight, starting at 16th. Matthew Zwack and Anthony Burrows, starting 17th and 18th.
Right around this cut line, that's where you want to be. James Holzer, Colin Bowden, right around 20th. The Merchant, Smallwood, Pfeffer, and Doucette. Again, some drivers in there that have had some rough luck, including Doucette. We hope his internet holds up tonight.
Wyatt Tinsley, Daniel Falkingham, 2 drivers who were rookies in the Coke Series this past season. Kevin King and Logan Helton, they're starting 27th and 28th, rounding out the top 30. Andrew Navarro and Daniel Botafuco, who needs a good run. He's at the speed, though, the last 2 weeks.
A tough start for McKissick, for Olot as well. Honeycutt's been strong, but he's going to have to come from 33rd. Blaze Crawford, 34th. Timmy Holmes, 35th. And Alfala shown some more signs of speed, but he struggled here last year in the Contender Series. Going to have to march up from the back of the field in this one.
Caden Rush, Michael P. Frisch, Max Brady, and Christopher Hill, your final 4 drivers that round out tonight's 40-car grid for the 3rd round of 7 in the 2023 eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series. Quick look at the weather this evening before we go green flag racing, or daytime, as it were, in Phoenix, because the in-sim date is October 21st, 2023. So this past Saturday, right around 12:15 p.m. local time, Partly cloudy skies, air temp 72 degrees Fahrenheit, track temp 92 degrees Fahrenheit, winds headed to the east at 3 miles an hour, humidity of 24%. You would expect it to be a little bit drier than normal in the desert. Now, wouldn't we, Blake?
I guess so, especially at this time of the year, but you can look and see the weather that we have for tonight. Slightly cooler, 72 degrees, 92 track temperature. Is going to put a lot of speed in this racetrack. And one unique thing here about Phoenix, James, and this was kind of something that we had to deal with in the Contender Series when I was running at Phoenix a couple of years ago, this very unique and different restart zone. You can see the pace car already pulls in as everybody will pace down the back straightaway. But now we have the Geico restart zone in, so we will allow these guys to pull up to it and get us going here for 100 laps.
All set to go. Race number 3. The Contender Series is green, and Jonathan Delaney and Dylan Alt will bring us to the front stretch into the flag stand into the green, and they already fan out behind the field. 2, 3, 4 wide, a little bit further back as they head to turn 1 for the first time, and they are still 3 and 4 wide throughout most of this field.
Well, you can see that stack up. Novak, who started in the 4th position, believe that is, on the top row. He just stacked everything up, did not get such a great launch. Pfeffer's going to try to make a big move here into 3 and 4. They're 3 wide throughout the field. And again, James, this has been a different Contender Series field than what we've been accustomed to seeing. Everything usually gets pretty single file, strung out a little bit. Not been the case here in 2023. You can see it through your first few cars, but especially here 1 and 2 in these NASCAR Xfinity Series cars, James, you're going to see a lot of cars that are going to be able to make that very top side of the racetrack work to their advantage. Going to make it tough to make some moves. That's Salas, that's down there on the bottom trying to make some moves early on in this race.
In the Coke Series race here in September, we saw a lot of speed on that top line. Tucker Manor used it to pinch Casey Kerwin down and ultimately maintain the race lead and the win. And early on, it looks like the speed may well be up top too. But don't tell that to Vicente Salas, because he muscled his way underneath Taylor Hurst to get a spot. Now looks like he'll go to the inside of Zach Novak to try and gain one more position. That would put him up in 4th if he can wrest that spot away.
See if he can do that. It's Taylor Hurst, somebody else that was in the Coke Series, not this past season, but in 2022, looking to try and make his way back. Salas has been on it early on in that SRI Toyota, trying to make up as many spots as he can. And he's been able to do so with relative ease. You can see the field starting to string out and kind of get out of some of the 3 wide formation that we saw a little bit earlier, but still around that 20th position, which again is kind of that marker that you're aiming for. Still 3 wide further back in the field. The likes of LaPrade, Derek Justice, who needs a strong run tonight, and several more cars that are kind of in that midfield where it's going to be pretty hot and heavy early.
Keeping an eye on Salas, keeping an eye on the midfield. One thing I noticed about Salas already as he completes the pass on Novak in 1 and 2 is that he was running way up towards the middle of the racetrack from the bottom on quarter entry. Bit of a different line compared to everybody else that we're seeing in this field so far, but strung out they have amongst the top 10. And then right back here in this mix, Derek Justice, Daniel Smallwood. This is all, again, right around that 20th position, and they are still door-to-door, 2x2 for about 20 spots deep.
And I'll tell you, Eddie Kerner, somebody that started up front in 8th, has fallen back to 11th, and he was a little bit sideways there off of 1 and 2, running in about that 10th or 11th position. As we continue to watch kind of that midfield battle, kind of zeroed in on Colin Bowden right now, and that Moon Car machine just gets by Derek Justice and will slide his way up. Somebody that I had the fortune of working with in the Contender Series when I was racing in it 2 years ago. And again, he's kind of somebody else that needs a really strong run tonight. Was in a good position at Homestead, or not in a good position rather, but kind of was able to take advantage of a lot of that chaos that happened in that number 69.
And also, as I think of Colin Bowden as a driver and what he likes to do generally in Coke Series and Contender Series competition, is one car, that might have been James Holzer that was sideways on corner entry there, but Bowden is the kind of driver who is willing to take a risk, especially when it comes to strategy. And Blake, you talked about it at the top of the broadcast, how we might see some drivers maybe take some strategy calls as we get our first yellow flag of the evening. But Bowden kind of in the points position where if we go green, it might be worth his while to either short pit or wait until the very end of the cycle to come in and see if you can't get a little bit more track position.
We'll see if he's able to do that, although we'll try to take a look at what brought out this latest yellow. Again, it's worth noting that in these races, it's going to be automatic yellows that are thrown by the iRacing service. And I think it was one of the Altus cars I think I saw out of the corner of my eye that had kind of taken a spill going into turn 3. And this is a pretty common incident. So everybody kind of has a different braking line depending on where they want to go. And you could see right there, I believe that's Honeycutt. And that number 10 car, yes, it is. They got in the back of Ryan Doucette. We talked about the internet struggles that he's kind of had early on this year. And, I mean, he was 90 degrees sideways, completely turned. It was enough to pass the threshold for a yellow. And we'll give some of these drivers in the back, James, the opportunity. If they want to pit, they can. We've been through 10 laps. So I don't know if you quite want to do it, but you don't really have much to lose if you're kind of 30th on back at this point.
I'm not sure if there's any value in trying to get tires, but if someone wants to top off for fuel and maybe try and extend the green flag run, if we go green for 50 or 60 laps, I think that's certainly something you can consider if you're running, anywhere from 30th on back, where maybe you lose 5 or 6 spots. But if you're already that far back in the field, does it matter all that much? Here is a look at the live bubble. Remember that points in the Contender Series do include 1 drop, so your lowest finish amongst the 7 races is not counted, and the 6 highest finishes are. So as we start to factor that in, we start to get a clear picture of who will be right around that 20th position and that all-important cutoff to make it into the Coke Series for next year. And we see how tight it is already. It's Brian Mercurio who is 20th on the board, and Anthony Burrows, incidentally, right behind him in the running order. That is the first driver being 21st on the outside looking in.
And again, I think it's worth mentioning, of course, nothing's official until we actually kind of work through everything, but it has been noted, of course, we've well documented Michael Conti announcing his retirement. We've done the same with Alan Bowes, who on championship day at Homestead for the Coke Series announced his retirement. So we're likely going to see what maybe 22 or perhaps more cars. That's one thing to keep in mind. Again, it's not official until we're ready to go. But speaking of being ready to go here, James, pace car's already off. And looks like we're about to get going. So Doucette was the only one to pit. He was really the only one that had an opportunity to do so.
So Doucette comes in, green flag comes back out. Nice restart for Jonathan Delaney. And Vicente Salas immediately got the jump behind him, read that restart perfectly, and he may and will clear Dylan all. So Salas up to second, already making moves after a pretty solid start. Began tonight in 9th, already up to the runner-up spot, and now may be hunting for the race lead underneath Jonathan Delaney. He'll go into turn 3.
I tell you what, oh boy, we got a big crash here on the back straightaway. Caution is out. Daniel Falkingham is involved. Christopher Pfeffer, Logan Helton gets a piece of it as well. Those are kind of the main 3 that you can kind of see parked and trying to get their cars rolling in the right direction. Wanted to note there, James, on that restart, we almost saw a couple of drivers hit the inside wall, if you can believe that. Of course, they're going to use every bit of space they can here down in the dogleg. But kind of as a result of that, there are a couple guys that had to swerve to miss it, got this field stacked up. And when they got 4 wide, there just wasn't enough room. I think if we kind of zeroed in on James Holzer, kind of that pink 47 car, that's going to be around, I think, where most of this started. But we were looking at the highlights from the Coke Series and pretty much saw this exact same wreck with Alan Bowes off of turn 2 and how tight this track gets on the exit of the corner. And I believe somebody may have tagged the wall back there, but let's go ahead and see 47 of James Holzer. You're going to see him in the middle. He had a little bit of contact with Pfeffer and off the corner. Oh, Pfeffer just tags the wall. Got a little bit tight, hits the wall, checks him up, and there's just nowhere for Pfeffer, or excuse me, for Logan Helton to go.
But that's classic Phoenix almost, and especially in that corner, whether or not it's turn 2 or turn 4, it does have this sort of funneling effect, especially if you're racing 2 and 3 wide like they were in the back. So it's not like that Holzer, I think, intended to get into Pfeffer. I just don't think that he thought that Pfeffer was as close to the wall as he did, and when Pfeffer ricocheted off the wall on corner exit, Holzer didn't have enough time to react because they're just racing so close to one another.
Yeah, so another incident here again. We had, James, I think we waited until the 4th race, I believe, of last year's Contender Series to have our first caution. We have more than passed that already, at least this season. But the other thing that's really kind of changed the game here this year is the updated damage model that's been on these NASCAR Xfinity Series cars, and that a little bit more like their real-life counterparts with the composite bodies. They're a little bit more durable than they were last year, so it's keeping guys kind of in the hunt when maybe they've had a little bit of damage. It's a little bit of a different situation here, where last year damage was really sensitive on this car. It's not so much the case. Of course, you don't want any damage. It's going to slow you down, but the degree to which it slows you down is going to be a little bit more.
And if you want more information on the world of eNASCAR, take out your mobile device and scan the QR code on the lower right-hand portion of your screen to get all the updates for the eNASCAR Coca-Cola iRacing Series, Contender Series, College Series, and more, courtesy of iRacing, the official simulation partner of eNASCAR. Jonathan Delaney to the inside, Vicente Salas to the outside. Salas will not have the luxury of being able to read Delaney's restart because he's starting in the opposite lane of Delaney. It will be Dylan Alt who has the opportunity to try and read and launch and go with Delaney, and he did not quite get the same jump that Salas did when Salas was on the bottom, one restart ago. So those two will be door to door. Salas up high, Alt down low, and then 2 and 3 and 4, and how many other wide you want to call it further back.
Oh, we got another one sliding through, and somehow they saved it. Doucette actually went down to the pits, I think, trying to avoid that, as he thought that, who was it, Wyatt Tinsley in that QT Toyota. Man, he went for a ride, and almost like kind of what we saw with Doucette. I was wondering if it was going to trigger a caution, but apparently not. It was right in front of James Holzer again, who's been in the midst of a couple of incidents already.
That is not the quick trip through pit lane that Ryan Doucette wanted, because we stay green flag racing. So now he will lose a tremendous amount of time. And it's just already going to come down pit road, I think, and take service as a result. And now we get the yellow while he's in pit road. Cars wrecking in turn 4. So that I have no idea where exactly he's going to come out after all this, though. I think he went a lap down before the yellow flag came out.
And I think once again, it was around James Holzer once again where this happened, James. And I know we were just talking about that he's been involved in a couple of incidents this season. Was just involved kind of the lap prior in that entire situation that kind of put Doucette down in the pits and ran into the back of Tinsley. And I think this is just going to be kind of another situation that we see getting into turn 3 of kind of a disagreement over where the braking zone is and where drivers are trying to run. If they're running the high side in turn 3, they're going to brake a little bit later. And he just runs into the back of Caden Rush. And there's nothing that Rush could have done there. And unfortunately, Navarro, Tinsley, Buttafuoco may have gotten a piece of this as well.
Very quickly, this is becoming a race of attrition. We'll get a look at the replay here and see what happened in full speed as they came through turns 3 and 4. The track opens up, but yeah, just a big sin there. Caden Rush gets knocked down to the inside retaining wall, and Buttafuoco was the last driver in this field that needed to have something like this happen. He already has been caught up in incidents in the first 2 races of the campaign, and now he's really going to need something special, regardless of how fast he may be in the upcoming races. He's got to find a way to get points tonight, or it's going to be very, very difficult for him to have any shot at making the Coke Series next year.
One thing that comes out of this, I mean, several drivers with heavy jam. Joey Brown, I mean, his highest total between 2 races was already a point. He has a meatball flag. So does Andrew Navarro. Buttafuoco got a significant amount of damage in that one. He obviously needed a good race, as you chronicled. So did Caden Rush. So a lot of drivers kind of who already are behind the 8 ball in a way. Logan Helton kind of is as well. Christopher Pfeffer experiencing issues early in this race. But again, that's just a move there, James, when it comes down to this series, how competitive it is, how desperate these guys. Again, these are guys that are wrecking in the back. These are guys that are wrecking from 20th on back. They're having bad runs. These guys just get desperate at this point. They know how difficult it is to kind of come back at this point. and they have to try and make something happen. I think that's where that's kind of setting in right now, especially for Holzer, who's kind of made a lot of very aggressive moves already tonight.
I'm going to throw out a really, really big brain idea that I'm not convinced would work, but I'm curious to see if you think, Blake, because I know you're the kind of person as a driver who might try and go for something like this. You think somebody could come down pit road and try and bank on there being so many yellows that maybe they can stretch the fuel out a good long bit?
It's possible. I think the Road to Pro race here was 160 laps. Oh, this happened under caution. Getting into the back of Joey Brown. You can see the 14 of Brown goes into the wall, trying to identify who that other car involved was. But Brown's out of the race.
Yeah, Brown is pulled behind the wall. I think that was Agnell Phillip from my glances there. That was the one who got into the back of Joey Brown. As we'll get set for the restart here. Delaney, the control car, Salas up top again, and Novak now. Remember that Delaney and Novak are teammates both at Rise Esports and at Lockdown Racing, so those two may well be able to work together in order to get a good jump on Salas and Alt and company. So let's watch the Sunoco cars down on the inside lane and see what kind of restart they get as we go back to green flag racing. Just over 20 laps complete. Yep, you can see it right there. They both launched immediately, and look at how far Zach Novak was able to crawl up alongside of Salas. Those two may well go 1 and 2 by the time they get to turn 1, but Salas will have something to say about it. He'll fight back on the inside down the backstretch.
And Novak's car just working so well in the bottom right now. And we almost nearly got out of shape once again in the middle part of the field. Daniel Smallwood had a little bit of contact with Anthony Burrows. They ended up collecting it up and saving it. Burrows quickly on the radio apologized for that, but so far so good. They're able to work it out. Just hoping we can kind of build some laps. I know you kind of talked about before he went green there whether you could try and stretch it on fuel. And again, this is kind of the difference in the trucks and the Xfinity Series car. 80 laps was kind of what I was able to stretch out of a run for the trucks at this racetrack. So probably need a lot of help to be able to make that happen for this race. But I don't know, if we get a caution in the next lap or two, it's definitely possible.
It would take some very outside of the box thinking to be able to pull it off. As you look at this Hornets net, which is pretty much dead center of the field. Ray Alfala is in the mix. Caden Honeycutt, Briar LaPrade, all once again around the 20th position. We keep coming back to that number. It's top 20 who we know should get the crack at the Coke Series, but again, a lot of permutations, a lot of combinations that can end up playing out here. And as you look at live points, yet again, it's Mercurio that has the last spot in the top 20. Burrows, who has the first spot outside of it.
Really, really tight right now, and see kind of falling back there. One driver that's just in front of Ray Alfala there, who's kind of lost several spots since we kind of got going, was Briar LaPrade. Had a great qualifying effort, but unfortunately just, I think, kind of gets tagged in the wrong line sometimes here at Phoenix. You can just kind of get in a bad line in terms of restarts, and it's going to shuffle you back a little bit. And LaPrade back about 5 or 6 spots since we got going. Meanwhile, Honeycutt talked about how strong he's been as he tags a little bit of the wall off at turn 2. He's kind of had the opposite. Started back in 33rd, kind of missed everything that's gone on so far. Talked about the points advantage that he had coming into tonight. So the fact he's in the top 20, who's doing himself a service right now.
There are a lot of drivers right around Honeycutt who have gained a lot of track positions since we got going. Ray Alfala is up 15 positions, as is Honeycutt, as is Timmy Holmes is sort of there, 13 spots as we go on board with Manchester, Tennessee's Briar LaPrade, sitting in the 19th spot in car number 19 after starting in the 14th position, so slipping back a little bit, but not much you can do when you're boxed in like this, and it's a solid 2 and 3 wide pretty much everywhere you go around this racetrack. Blake McCandless.
See how tight it is, and somebody even like Justice and again, I'm just jealous of these drivers that they're able to kind of scrape the wall a little bit. Again, 2 years ago when I was running, that would have been a lot worse. And LaPrade gets shuffled out once again. You can see he was trying to hold Justice really tight, got a little bit of contact, shoves him up the fence or up the way, and he's going to lose about another handful of spots or so out of this. So sometimes when it's when it's not going good, when it rains, it pours. And unfortunately for LaPrade, just losing a lot of track position right now, scrapes the wall again. But again, the point I was making, I'm jealous that these guys are kind of able to scrape the wall a little bit. It doesn't seem like it's affecting the speed of their car too much.
The new damage model really has changed the way you can race in this series, and I think we've seen it very clearly in the first 2 and call it a third races now. This is one of the more physical Contender series that I can remember, at least up to this point. This series, especially a few years ago, was much more about raw speed, raw pace. Not that it isn't, but you didn't see as much door banging, you didn't see as much side-by-side racing, but this crop of Contender Series drivers appear to be much, much more ready to get up on the wheel, grab it with both hands, and if you need to bang fenders with somebody or rough them up a little bit, I don't think too many of them in this field mind that.
Well, I mean, isn't there a trickle-down effect that usually happens? I mean, it's kind of no secret that with how much is on the line in these Coke Series races, how many of those races kind of come down to these late race restarts where you kind of have to get your elbows out and maybe make a little bit of contact if you need to. We know how important winning is. You know, that kind of mentality works its way down, and you're going to start to see more drivers utilize that as you kind of get a shot of it right there. Vicente Salas kind of running way up the racetrack will make a little bit of contact with Delaney. But again, it's a scenario if you're Delaney, yeah, you're going to give up the race lead right now, but how worth it is it to try and battle Salas, as you can see that 55 car is retaking the race lead here.
Well, Salas used that same line on corner entry here into turn 1 a lap ago that he's used all race, and he slides up towards the middle of the racetrack more than just about anybody else. And that's what he did to Delaney. He just slid up into his door and took away the spot. So now Salas has got control of this race. He's up front, and Delaney will happily ride in second along with his teammate Zach Novak. Worth noting that that pairing is still linked together, and they're both running really, really well. Then Dylan Alt peeks to the inside of Novak and Colin Keister. Meanwhile, 20th is still a mess, but we see, as we get a look at live points, that Anthony Burrows is down in the top 20. Christopher Hill is the first driver out of it. Hill currently scored in 29th.
Well, it's a lot easier to make those types of moves if you're as fast as Salas is. You know, we talk about all these different things you have to do with restarts and track position, how hard it can be compassed and all those things. But if you have speed, you can overcome all of that. And right now, no question about it, Salas started back in 9th, has been making his way on the bottom, which is a little bit harder, it seems, to try and make those passes from that position. And yet he is already in the lead and starting to stretch that advantage. We talked about how dominant he was here a year ago. But there's no substitute here for speed, James. And right now, Salas has got it. And many of those dead zone cars we're kind of seeing, you know, do the same thing. Ryan Luzas has been moving up, although probably a little bit of a misspeak there because he's not on dead zone anymore. But Derek Bordeaux, Colin Keister, several of those drivers, Cody Bias has made his way up, Colin Bowden. So a lot of those dead zone drivers, they seem to have a really, really good piece here for the race.
Good look at the middle of this field as everybody's begun to strung out. Derek Justice and Timmy Holmes fighting for position on your screens now. That, again, 20th position, and then James Holzer in that pink machine, that Chevrolet Camaro just behind. And Kevin King, who you saw highlighted just a few moments ago. Blake, I'm not sure if there's a driver that's seen more of just sim racing history in general in this field, maybe save for Ray Alfala, than Kevin King. He is as experienced as they come in the Contender Series. That has run just about everything in iRacing practically since its release in 2008.
Oh yeah, I mean, this is probably something that's not too unfamiliar with him in terms of competition. Being able to run back in the DMP days, the old days of Papyrus, which predated iRacing. Being able to race against stiff competition is certainly something that he's very used to. And, this is going to be kind of a Contender Series for him where he's going to need that experience. Hasn't had the luck that he's necessarily needed these first couple of races. And this just kind of seems like this Contender Series for him. He's going to have to grind it out and just find a way to kind of barely get back into the top 20 by the end of this thing. And that's where that experience is really going to matter. We talk about how this has kind of become a young man's game in terms of sim racing here at the eNASCAR level, but there's still a healthy space for these veterans to be able to kind of showcase their talents themselves as well, and kind of, hopefully set an example for some of these younger drivers.
Daniel Falkingham, the man that we ride on board with, winner in the eNASCAR College iRacing Series at Daytona last month. So he picked up a little bit of scholarship money. Also ran in the Coke Series, also running the Contender Series. Runs about just about everything, I think. And we've seen him bounce around. And if you want more information on the eNASCAR College iRacing Series, conveniently, you can scan that QR code and you can register now for the next race on the College Series schedule, which is not too far from now. We've got another time attack coming our way, and then we've got more action in the College Series coming in November. Time attack actually is live for our next race in the eNASCAR College iRacing Series, which don't blink for too long, because we're going to be on that Tuesday night before you know it. We head to Dover Motor Speedway November 7th, so 2 weeks from tonight, the next race for the College Series. That will have an 8 p.m. start on eNASCAR.com/live. Kevin King and Derek Justice door to door still. And now that we've actually gotten some green flag laps in, Blake, this race went wire to wire pretty much last year under green flag racing. Obviously not the case this time around, but once they settle in and sort of clear that threshold, you can see 30, 40, 50, whatever laps into a run you want here. And so as I look at the pylon and look at drivers who were able to pit, it might be worth keeping an eye on Kevin King, because he was able to top off on one of the most recent yellows, and so he should be able to go further than just about anyone else on this green flag run. Daniel Falkingham is also on the same strategy, as is Christopher Hill. So worth watching those three cars, I think, if this goes green for 50 or 60 laps and we see a lot of the leaders come down pit road.
Well, and one of the things that's kind of changed with this newer Phoenix configuration is the fact that pit road is kind of a little bit of a longer distance, or you're going to spend more time down there under the mist of a green flag stop than you used to. Of course, they shorten the distance, but the length to which you have to go, you pretty much have to exit almost kind of where the dog leg is for pit lane. You see the blue line just in the portion of your screen there for a second. That's where you have to merge kind of back onto the track, which certainly isn't an issue here at Phoenix. But, being able to have that advantage if King starts to slide back just a little bit, that's something that he can kind of use to his advantage, is the fact that cars are going to be spending more time on pit road if we do get green flag stops than we did. You can see the rear view here from Vicente Salas, who mentioned kind of grabbed the lead and was immediately able to jump out to about this half-second advantage. It's kind of stalled here for now, but you can see focus, but relatively calm right now for Vicente Salas. You can even kind of see the tape on his wheel and just kind of how neutral that car is. It looks like the balance is really good. He's not having to steer too much because it's tight. He's not overcorrecting too much because it's loose. And clearly there's just something that he has figured out about this Xfinity Series car, because he has been so good at it here these last 2 years.
Worth noting that your pit window is about 55 to 60 laps. We showed that on our eNASCAR race analysis. So that would be where we would be looking for these drivers to come down pit road if we hadn't had yellow flags. But we've had 3 yellows over the course of this race, and that's added maybe about 10 laps. So do the math there, Blake. You guess that the window could extend probably to the ballpark of maybe lap 70, 75-ish if we're sort of spitballing it?
I think that's about where these drivers could go to, but again, you have to imagine that some of these drivers just want to get track position. They may short pit a couple laps. They may kind of split it more down the middle, because there is a little bit of tire fall off. There's not a ton, but we know if you come down early, it can be really tough, really difficult to gain that track position. I know that's something, again, when I was running in this race, I kind of thought, oh, well, I'll try to split it more down the middle or go a little bit longer and try to use those fresh tires to get on by. It's really difficult to do that. So I think once you see a couple of cars come in, which we could see it near halfway, we could see it a little bit past that the rest of them are going to follow, because you can really use those new tires, even if it's just for 2 or 3 laps, to get some track position, and makes it really difficult to try to make those spots back up.
if we're sort of running around the table here with all the thoughts and all the different pit strategies that you could use, there is the stay out all the way strategy. There's also the, and especially if you are a Kevin King or somebody in that camp, you could try and split this race down the middle from when you came in, which if you really sort of run it back, that would put you in pit road, call it still about lap 70, 75 too. So it might not make that much of a difference, or you could try and run it all the way to the end of your fuel window and go to about lap 80. But as I say that, we've got cars on pit road. Daniel Falkingham and Michael P. Frisch are in a little bit before the straight up halfway window of the race. So if you're coming in this early, Blake, what are you trying to accomplish with your strategy if you're a Falkingham or a Frisch?
Well, clearly these guys, they don't have great track position right now, and whether that's because of incidents they've been involved in or a number of different things, there's kind of a couple of different approaches that you can take, and I think theirs is as soon as we can make it to the end, let's go ahead and pit. Let's try to jump. Let's try to get some track position and hope that in the midst of that cycle we can kind of gain some spots before a caution comes out. And I think with what we've seen this year and how this Contender Series has really played out, why not try something a little bit different? Why not stay out? This kind of almost feels more like NIS, where you always know that that caution is lurking somewhere around the corner. So being able to hopefully time it right, which if you're in Falkingham or Frisch's scenario, definitely need to make up some points. I know Frisch was kind of a little bit beneath that cut line when we were looking at it a little bit earlier on in the night. So why not try something a little bit different? Instead of splitting it up, they're going to kind of take that approach of going early and seeing what track position they can make up.
Here is a good look at Mr. Four-time Ray Alfalo, the Floridian. Say that 10 times fast. But Alfalo, someone who did not compete in the Coke Series for the very first time this year. A crazy stat to think about, maybe even beyond the 4 Coke Series titles that he has. Just that he had competed in every single Coke Series season, all 13 of them that we had up to this point, but did not finish in the top 20 in last points last year, had to run Contender a year ago and missed it. Wasn't top 20 in Contender a year ago, so he fell back into the qualifying series, made it into the Contender Series again through top 20 in points of qualifying series, and now he's trying to work his way back into the Coke Series as Christopher Hill comes down for service on lap 55.
One of those cars that's down there. But again, this has been a big year personally for Ray Alfalo to kind of rediscover that love that he has for sim racing. And of course, a lot has gone on in his personal life. He was able to go out and run a limited late model at Hickory a time or two. He was able to test and run a race out there as well. So I wouldn't say sim racing has fallen down the priority list at all for him, but he's definitely, I think, reevaluated, how much do I want to keep doing this? And certainly he still has the fire to be able to compete. And we saw kind of flashes of the Ray Alfalo of old through the qualifying series in the trucks. Was very competitive. Even I ran a couple of races with him. And yeah, you could see that he still has the talent. He still has the desire to do this. Just needs everything to kind of line up. Speaking of late models here, take a look back here at Caden Honeycutt, who again has just marched through the field. Started back in 33rd and is up to 15th. Won an ARCA Menards Series West race this past weekend to make it 2 for 3 for him. Not in a late model, obviously, but has been a good last couple of weeks for him out west. Was even able to go up and celebrate in the stands, which was something that we've seen more drivers do recently, and really, really cool to see as we see a whole host of cars starting to make their way down to the pits.
Lots of drivers in for service. Kwame Scott, Derek Justice, Timmy Holmes, Brandon McKissick amongst the drivers in on pit road. Eddie Kerner, also part of this group, coming in for service on lap 58. So just after halfway, and we're starting to see some of the field cycle through. I think we're starting to see some of these pit strategy hands being played as well, as here comes Vicente Salas, the fastest driver in this race so far, in for service on lap 59 of 110.
Now, I am a little bit surprised that Salas and a couple of these drivers that are really high up in the points would come in at this time. And again, I know that, yes, Salas, if he wants to win the race, this is probably the right strategy to go with. But you have to balance everything, right? If you're in an advantageous points position, the last thing you want is for this cycle to not play out. You get caught with the yellow, you're a lap behind, and then you're kind of working behind the 8-ball. If you stay out, you kind of manage your situation. Even if it ends up losing you a spot or two at the end, you're kind of negating some of the risk of pitting early. But if it continues to play out, yes, this is when you want to pit. But again, it's all about managing risk here, staying inside that top 20 in this Contender Series. Novak's going to follow suit.
Novak is in, Taylor Hurst is in, Cody Bias is in, Daniel Smallwood is in, Seth DeMerchant is in, and Femi Olat will now jump to the race lead. But the top 5 there pretty much universally down for service with 50 laps to go.
So now we're going to kind of get the tail end of this. Those drivers that are kind of throwing a Hail Mary here that are still going to stay out. You can see the amount of laps they've had out since they last the last lap that they did stop. So, for example, Salas pit on lap 59. The rest of these guys pit on lap 18 and 19. So, as you mentioned, they have a little bit of wiggle room here where they can go a little bit longer than some of these drivers. So, they have about, I don't know, probably another 15, 20 laps somewhere in that ballpark range or so. They can stay out if they want to.
So Olat, Agnell Phillip, Wyatt Tinsley, and Christopher Pfeffer are the 4 who we will watch very closely. And this now becomes a very dangerous part of this race, and we're seeing it now perfectly on our screens. But you've got drivers on old tires, drivers on new tires, different speeds, different paces, and sometimes closing rates are just really, really difficult to adjust to, and we end up with drivers that bounce off one another, and we may get a yellow flag out of it. So if you're Olat, if you're Phillip, Tinsley, and Pfeffer, you're hoping that somebody runs into somebody else, and that somebody else is not you.
Well, it was almost Olat right there, as you can kind of see him kind of right in front of Eddie Kerner, who's getting kind of just held up by the slower traffic. And not to mention, you have Michael P. Frisch, who came in very early in that cycle. He was running back in the 30s and kind of is up here in 15th. So that can show you the difference that fresh tires makes. But he's also a car that's going to be ailing a little bit here on slightly older tires. But you can see a little bit of patience. Not something that Kerner, I'm sure, wanted to kind of mess with. As you can see, a couple of cars here follow each other into the wall off of turn 2. And that's a pretty common issue too there, James. When somebody in front of you makes a mistake, it's, you know, it can be kind of easy that maybe you follow them into that same mistake.
A little bit of follow the leader in a figurative sense, which sometimes means that you end up following somebody into the fence in a worst case scenario. Most of the field has worked their way around Femi Olat and company, and that will make it a little bit easier not only for him, but for the drivers behind him. Tinsley, Pfeffer, Salas trying to charge and catch those 3. But once these final few cars clear Olat, it largely is clear track for everybody, which is either a good thing or a bad thing, depending on how you look at it, because it does lower the possibility that we get a yellow flag.
We'll see if it does, and Olat clearly kind of hoping that something happens here. One of the kind of handful of guys we have that were in the Coke Series last year that just has not had the luck so far in this Contender Series. And looking at the standings kind of coming into this race, it was Kevin King, it was Femi Olat, Derek Justice, Joey Brown, amongst several of the competitors that were a part of the Coke Series that are looking as though their path to get back is starting to look more and more narrow through these next couple of races, as we could see kind of this kind of conglomeration here of drivers mixed up with these strategies, and somebody's a little sideways there. I think that was maybe Falkingham.
Might have been, as Logan Helton actually was the one who was all out of shape there just a few moments ago, and they are stacked up a proper 3 and 4 wide just about everywhere you look here on the racetrack.
Oh, go, and Holzer's going to go into the fence in turn 1. He keeps it together after he had a little bit of contact. I think it was twofold. He maybe scraped a little bit with Michael P. Frisch as well as Ray Alfala. And now they're bouncing 4 wide, and they may crash again. Helton is sideways. They save it somehow. And now Holzer's trying to battle back from some of the cars that just passed him after he brushed the wall.
That is amazing. Worth noting that I think Logan Helton may be on an alternate strategy, and indeed he came in earlier than just about everybody else, so he's been fighting tire wear more than anyone else in the opening 20 laps of the second run. That's why you see him sliding around, and you could say that the rear tires are hot on that 63. And Blake, quite frankly, I think that would be a little bit of an understatement. You could about cook an egg, I think, with the way he has gotten them all lit up sideways on every single corner exit he tries to tackle around Phoenix.
Well, again, he had damage, and he pit a lap prior to Frisch, and we know how early that some of those NFR cars pitted. And, oh, Holzer again slides up, crosses the nose of Michael P. Frisch. And, golly, that was almost something. We've talked about that pink 47 car a lot, being in the middle of multiple scenarios there. And, golly, that was just about another moment right there with Frisch as he kind of slid up, wasn't quite clear off of 2. But was able to hang on to it. And again, this is kind of where everybody's looking to hang on to position. A lot of guys back here outside of the top 20 in points and trying to make their way back up. You can see back here Briar LaPrade. He has had a struggling night, which has not been commonplace, at least through the first couple of weeks. But looking to try and make up some spots here late in the going.
He's got fresher tires than most of the drivers around him, so he should be able to gain a few spots if this goes green. The problem is that he is in 28th, and he may be able to get a few spots, but you really need to try and consistently finish within the top 20 to give yourself a shot at a top 20 position at points when the Contender Series ends. So LaPrade certainly has some work to do within the final 40 laps of tonight's race. Meanwhile, Vicente Salas has already cleared Christopher Peppers. You get a good look at Daniel Smallwood here, running in the 23rd position. But Salas is clear of Pepper. Pepper is one of the drivers that stayed out. He is about, call it, 5 seconds in closing back of Wyatt Tinsley is Salas, and that would be for second. So you figure now that Pfeffer's been passed by one of the cars on the normal cycle, that we'll see him down pit lane in short order. The Smallwood continues to try and find a way to the inside or the outside of Ray Alfala, and then Christopher Hill just ahead of them.
See Smallwood, very intense, really focused, trying to make up some spots. Here kind of in the middle portion of the field. You can see him right behind Ray Alfala. This is for 22nd is what Alfala currently clings to. But we're kind of at this point, James, we still see several of those drivers up front that have not pit, or at least a pair of them in Femi Olot and Wyatt Tinsley. This is kind of at a point where if the caution were to come out now, they're fine. Everybody else is going to have to come down and take tires at this point because their tires are 15 or 20 laps old in some cases. So this would be the window with which they were looking for. This is when they need that yellow flag to come out, because if they do, they're geniuses. They have an extra set of tires, which you probably wouldn't need anyway. But they would be in a really good spot and obviously gain a ton of track position. So they're kind of hoping that something happens at this point.
Agnell Phillip there to the inside of Femi Olot. Phillip currently running in 34th. He's the last car on the lead lap with fresh tires, but not really a pass that means all that much so far as this race is concerned. What does matter is that Vicente Salas has cut the gap to Wyatt Tinsley down to about 3 seconds now. So that battle for second is beginning to heat up, and then Femi Olot would be next in line.
And this is something that's worked in the past. I mean, heck, when I ran at Nashville here in this series 2 years ago, I was the probably 38th fastest car out of a 38-car field. I was horrible. I hate that track. I'm bad at it. And I kind of had to pull this strategy to have a shot, stay out, and just hope for a caution. We were able to get it and, you know, turn what should have been probably a 38th place finish into a 12th place finish. And Olot Tinsley trying to do that now. I know Tinsley had a little bit of damage, was involved in that incident a little bit earlier, so just trying to make something happen. As we look on board here through 3 and 4, Cody Bias somebody else who's had some really strong runs, shown a lot of speed here early in these first couple of races, and was able to get by there pretty easily. See Mercurio up the road, somebody else just a couple car lengths there ahead of Cody Bias. Somebody else, kind of like Taylor Hurst, who was in the Coke Series 2 years ago and trying to kind of get back into it.
Speaking of Coke Series and points, Daniel Smallwood now has managed to take over that first spot on the outside looking in. Brian Mercurio has been planted on 20th in the live points pretty much the whole way. Derek Bordeaux and Seth DeMerchant, Christopher Hill, and Colin Bowden, the other four just ahead of him. But you're starting to see those numbers around 20th begin to spread out. We're starting to really filter through who realistically will have a shot at the end of the Contender Series and who really won't have that much of an opportunity to make it in the Coke Series next year just because they've started so poorly in the 2023 Contender Series.
And I know we talked about it at the top of the show. It's very rare that you see somebody overcome a significant points deficit, especially through 3 races or so. So it's really just those handful of drivers that are kind of right around that 20th cut line. And then, heck, James, you kind of start to wonder if you're around that cut line, are you really racing for 21st? Are you racing for 22nd? You're hoping and praying maybe there's somebody else in the Coke Series who's in the top 20 in points who just doesn't want to come back and says, heck, I've had enough with it. You're kind of hoping at that point that may be the case. As you can see, Tinsley, despite the fact that he's staying out, you can see a little bit of damage on the right rear quarter panel. He is no longer at least going to be fighting for the lead as Salas, through the pit cycle, has worked up and passed him. So Olot, 27 laps to go, still has about 8 seconds of a gap between he to Salas, but you have to imagine that the fuel is going to start running low on that 43 car, so it's really in these next handful of laps he needs something to happen. But the field is, you can look at the gaps kind of the left-hand side of your screen, pretty stagnant, a couple car lengths separating most everybody right now.
You make a good point about that bubble, and we haven't had the chance to talk about that tonight, but I think it's worth bringing up that, yes, officially, it is the top 20 that more often than not get the invitations and are eligible to jump into the Coke Series. However, we usually do have a few drivers who say that they are going to decline to return, and they either take a break or they retire outright. We know about Michael Conti. We know Alan Bose has already announced it. And traditionally, we usually get anywhere from 1 to 2 more others who might not necessarily have made up their mind now, but as we get closer towards the 2024 season, elect to go one way or another, and some of them do step away from the series. So the bubble practically usually ends up being around 22nd, 23rd. Now, for our purposes, we're going to keep an eye on the top 20, but if you're Smallwood, if you're the 18, if you're Michael Frisch, try and go get every point, because it may still be enough. You just won't know immediately like the top 20 drivers in points will.
You really just need 1 or 2 races where you run top 10. That's kind of the marker that a lot of these drivers and teams kind of shoot for. And yes, we're going to have most of the same drivers that are running up front. The Zach Novaks, the Vicente Salases, the Ryan Luzes. You can see they've been competitive in pretty much every race, and that speed in this car tends to transfer well between all of these tracks. But if you're kind of one of those drivers that's around that cut line, you really need just kind of 1 or 2 races in your back pocket where you go out there and gain a substantial amount of points. And even if you're kind of finishing outside the top 20 a little bit, especially once we get to the end of the last race or two, because something that tends to happen is, we'll have 5 or 6 guys maybe not run the last race or so. It kind of negates the amount of points or the least amount of points that you can garner in a race if it's not a full session, and that's something that tends to happen at the end. Another reason why having early success kind of both in the qualifying series and in this series is so important, because sometimes drivers, when they know they're eliminated, they just won't show up for the last race.
And that does cut the gap that you can close out. If you've got to dig yourself out of a hole, traditionally it tends to be a little bit tougher to do that on the back end of the calendar than it is on the front end. So starting off well means a tremendous amount in this series. As you get a good look at Femi Olot trying to keep Vicente Salas at bay. It's a 6.8 second lead now, but we expect that Olot is going to need to come down pit road at some point.
Still 6.7 seconds, so I'm impressed that despite the fall off, that Olot, I mean, he has shown a decent amount of speed out here, but I just, again, he's got to be a couple laps away. Again, what was it, lap 18 or 19 that he last pit? He's looking over 70 laps right now on this run, or close to it. I mean, he's kind of running up against the wall here, or in terms of how long that he can go. I don't think Salas will catch him or pass him before he pits, but he needs something to happen here in this next lap or two, or this all may be for naught.
It would be about a 90-lap run after the pit stops, even with those initial cautions that Olot would have to try and pull off, which we don't think that's going to happen, but you never know. If someone's been able to really clutch and coast and do what they need to save fuel, it's certainly not out of the realm of possibility. However, as I listen to Femi Olot go around the racetrack, I do not hear him clutching on corner entry. Traditionally, that's the easiest way to save fuel.
Yeah, and just for an example, I hate bringing up my own experiences, but here at Phoenix in the qualifying series for the trucks, and we'll kind of get a good listen in here to Femi. Yeah, not shutting off the engine, not clutching at all, so he's just kind of running it out and hoping for a prayer at this point. Again, I remember the truck series here, you could go 80 laps, and that was with kind of shutting the engine off probably right here on corner entry, letting it coast, and then maybe about the center of 3 and 4, perhaps a little bit earlier, cutting the engine back on and being able to kind of run the rest of this dog leg about 80 or 90% throttle. Again, I know the trucks and Xfinity car are a little bit different. You're probably going to have more off throttle time in this car, but it's not going to be enough for Femi to go 90 laps. So there's just no way you can do it. Tinsley just called out over the radio that he's coming down this time. I imagine for Olot, it's probably going to be the next couple of laps as well. I got to give him credit, though. Great effort here, and something that, again, if we get a caution the next lap or two, they're going to look like geniuses, but looking like this strategy gamble may not pay off for them this time.
The main point, though, with Femi is that we have not heard him try to clutch, and if he were trying to make it to the end of the race, you figure he would be trying to actively save fuel some way, somehow, and based off of what we saw from that onboard, he is not. So this is not totally a mere formality at this stage, but if we don't get a yellow flag, then it will be, and Vicente Salas will assume control of this and be about a second and a half clear of Dylan Alt for the race lead at that point. Alt has cut the gap to Salas down a little bit, but Salas has been the fastest car around Phoenix all night and is closing in on maybe 10 laps or so before he potentially can celebrate his second victory of the Contender Series in 2023.
Well, again, he kind of came in a lap prior to Alt and Novak. We were talking about it, that if this plays out, that was likely going to be the better option, that you didn't want to get undercut in terms of the strategy. And there you see it right there. Femi Olot stretching the fuel as far as he can go. But unfortunately, he's not going to be able to go any further. Again, if he gets a caution this lap, he's a genius, because he'll have 4 fresh tires and he'll be able to exit the pits. But without it, he's going to lose a lap here, and unfortunately may be in a tough scenario. Now, the other thing, James, if we get a caution here in the last, 10 laps or so, Olot can stay out. He'll probably unlap himself. He can just flat out stay out. And if everybody else pits, he can hope that, maybe staying out on 5 or 6 lap older tires can work. We saw Tucker Minter do it and make it work in the Coke Series race, so Olot may not be out of it yet, but again, he needs a yellow.
You also saw him fall like a rock through the entire bubble of the top 20.
Oh, and there's the yellow he needed. Trouble. Ryan Doucette has spun from the 33rd position, and it was a self-spin for Doucette. No contact. Caution is out, and that is exactly what Femi Olot needed. I'm not sure if he went a lap down, though, but I don't believe he did. He's ahead of the pace car. He's ahead of the leader, so Olot may resume the lead here.
And I mean, this is just, it is barely, I think, that Olot was able to edge Vicente Salas out. It was not by all that much, but it was very, very, very tight. So that's big for Olat, and Salas and company now will all come down for service as you get a good look at what happened to Ryan Doucette. Just when you think you know how the script is going to end, Blake McCandless, we get another twist in the tail with 10 laps to go. And now it's another late race set of restarts, just like we saw in the Coke Series race, where someone's going to have to play the Tucker Minter role of holding all the field, and you're going to have many Casey Kerwins, Bobby Zielinski's trying to chase the leader down.
Looks like Novak's going to be the first off of pit lane. He's going to take 2 tires and elect to kind of try that strategy. But kind of taking another look through the replay at that. And, you know, and again, this is just me personally. I'm, you know, just speaking for myself here, but there's been a couple instances in this Contender Series. I don't want to throw anything at Ryan Doucette about intent or whatnot about spinning, but I don't know. There seems to be a lot of itchy arms at this time of the year in this series for racing, and I don't know there. I'd like to take another look at that, and I hope that was just him losing control of his car. But again, these guys are really talented, and they know exactly how to maneuver these cars. And you can see Olat's able to take advantage of it, and he's going to have the lead.
I think, if anything, when we take Doucette's incident into the equation, if you're looking at a team that really has not had a lot of success so far tonight, Altus Esports has not exactly had the night that they would have liked. James Holzer has not particularly been all that fast. He's been mired in mid-pack traffic. Seth the Merchant has run around 20th the entire night. So they'll look to regroup in 1 week's time and try and find a little bit more speed when we make our way to the next stop for the eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series, which will be Darlington Raceway. And you want to talk about racetracks that are narrow? The main groove there, pretty tight, but also incredibly fast. So a different kind of challenge awaits these drivers as we get ready for the restart coming up and what could be a wild finish.
Yeah, Dover's a track, again, so much can happen, very little space for things to unravel if they do. You know, I can remember in this race there were a lot of issues when I competed in this series with drivers overheating, running tape up to the very edge, getting a little bit of damage. There were a lot of drivers that kind of were battling that. Now, although the amount of tape that you can put on these cars is a little more straightforward in iRacing now. You don't quite have the percentage game anymore. It's kind of more just qualifying tape and race tape that you can run now. But back in the day, we'd see that a lot, that you really had to push the temperatures in these cars to get more downforce and get more speed, and any little bit of damage you got on the nose was going to hurt that a little bit. But not so much the case now. But again, Olat in a great position. It may not be a winning move on his old tires, but certainly something that he may be able to stay in the top 20. And for the rest of the field, good luck. This is going to be crazy.
Can Vicente Salas read the jump on Femi Olat and stay locked onto the rear bumper of Olat's Toyota Supra and draw even with Zach Novak entering turn 1? If I'm the Temecula, California native, that's exactly what I'm trying to accomplish, and he gets a good drive there as we go back to green flag racing. Almost bounced off of Jonathan Delaney, but Salas cutting right down to the bottom to take second away from Zach Novak.
Well, again, how close do you want to cut it? How aggressive do you want to be when you're in a good point situation already? You could see a little bit of respect being given up front, but as they funnel off at 2, there's going to be another crash. Michael P. Frisch is involved. As several drivers in the back, you can see Logan Helton. Golly, it's been so tough for 2 of these longtime iRacers and frequent competitors I've raced against a lot, the 87 cars. But another incident that I think starts a little bit further up the road. And I think Frisch and Helton were just kind of, you know, just kind of unlucky in this scenario. They had nowhere to go, and yeah, I think that's not something that initially started with them. I think it may have been McKissick and I think maybe Hill out of the corner of my eye.
Yes.
I thought, yeah.
Can't confirm. We'll take a look at the replay here, but it's McKissick and Hill that get together on quarter exit. Watch the orange and blue car, the black and red car there, right towards the center of your screen. That's Hill and McKissick. They make contact. And again, we talk about turn 2 having the funnel effect, narrowing up, especially if you're racing in packs that are 2 and 3 wide, and just nowhere that you can go if you are McKissick, if you are Hill, if you're Max Brady, who got some damage into that. and then Frisch and Helton, who got stuck on the inside retaining wall right by pit road. How about that cut through there for Daniel Falkingham, who might have used the front bumper as a bit of an unintentional battering ram, but it was enough to sort of clear the path and make sure that he didn't get caught up with too much damage. Falkingham, I think, will appreciate that. Still work to do so far as he's concerned. Would like to be a little bit higher up in the field than 29th, but as is, I think you'll take that option over being stuck down on the fence and stop, Blake.
Oh, no doubt about it. You can see Doucette getting his lap back, so he'll be put back on the lead lap. And going to set up a scenario here where we're not quite in overtime territory here for this race, but it's going to be just prior to that. I think it'll be 2 or 3 to go, depending on if the lights turn off on the pace car this time by. But again, so much can change here, James. I mean, we saw the picture of the drivers and where everybody was lined up completely turned on its head with a late race caution at Homestead. And I know up front, I would say we're likely not going to see a ton of changes. I don't think, yes, Olot may not win, Salas may get by him. But for the most part, I think top 6, top 7, you're going to manage. You're going to kind of know that you're in a good situation. But we've seen how desperate these drivers are kind of at the mid portion of the pack, and that's where a lot of these wrecks have originated, where it started. So the right-hand side of your screen could look totally different by the end of the night. How about Max Brady? I mean, that's a great example. That number 17 car was back in 39th, just hasn't had a lot of speed here tonight, not a lot of luck. He sits 25th right now, which, considering how his night has gone, that wouldn't be too bad of a race. And, you know, we have a 7 or 8 car pileup at the end. He's right back up in the top 20. So several scenarios here of drivers who have not had a good night that they're still in it. I mean, even Logan Helton, Frisch, they were just involved in that incident. They still have a shot at this thing if all things go well. And I mean, we know at Phoenix we can have some spectacular wrecks, especially on the last lap. And again, if we get to that white flag, we'll race it through to the end. We will not throw the caution flag, so spots will be available in that scenario.
If you are Femi Olot, though, and the most intriguing thing to me on this restart coming up, Salas traditionally loves to run high in the middle of turns 1 and 2 when we are under green flag conditions right here. He'll sort of slide up half a lane. And we saw that earlier with Jonathan Delaney. He was able to run up into Delaney a little bit and move him out of the race lead. However, Salas is up on that high lane. So if you're Vicente, can you stay alongside Femi Olot, read his jump on the restart, and then keep him pinned down on the inside so that you can roll momentum on that high line and take the race lead? If you're Salas, that's what you're attempting to do. If you're Femi Olot, you're hoping that you've got enough grip with tires that are a mere 2 laps older down to the bottom to potentially steal the victory away. Coming to green flag racing, a good look at Salas and Zach Novak, who's right behind all that second car on the inside. Will look to try and read the restart, and here comes Novak to the inside. Salas to the outside. Dylan Alt with a peak to the high line. They could be 3 wide for second entering turn 1.
3 wide for second. They're 3 wide further back in the pack as well. Salas looks to be clear of all those, so he kind of has a lot of room if he wants to run it up the racetrack. Going to have some momentum off the corner as Novak gets loose. He's going to be clear for second. Novak's going to go back down to the bottom of the block. If they get back to the white flag, it will be official. You can see Salas, fresher tires, has a little bit of speed, but how does he manage it with 1 lap to go?
Where does Femi Olot run in turn 1? You know Salas is going to have a deep run in the middle of the corner, and he almost gets to the rear bumper of Femi Olot, but doesn't make a move just yet, so he'll have 1 more opportunity in turns 3 and 4. Olot goes all the way down to the racetrack to block, and Salas sends him the bumper and then some, and he'll slide up the racetrack, and Vicente Salas makes the last lap pass to win at Phoenix for the 2nd year in a row in the eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series.
Gotta say, he's awfully thrilled with that. And, you know, I mean, he got into the back of him. He knew that Olot was going to go down. He was going to protect that lane. And he felt like with the fresher tires that he needed to do what he needed to do. Wasn't going to go in there and dump him, but definitely gave him a huge shot going into turn 3. Not something that wrecks him, but just moves him up the racetrack. And again, James, I didn't know if that was going to be a move that he was willing to make. You're going into turn 3. You have a 2nd place finish. It's more than good enough. But again, Salas came here to win. And that's clearly what he did, as he goes back-to-back at Phoenix in 2 separate seasons.
How many times have we seen a last lap move like that between Contender and Coke last year? We think of Casey Kerwin's run on Zach Novak at Pocono that put him in the championship four. Had Kerwin not gotten into Novak, he would not have been racing for a title last year, and he ended up the champion. So even though you may not love the fact that Salas got into the rear of Femi Olan and sent him up the racetrack to win this race, you don't know if you may end up needing those points at the end. And it may end up making a difference when we get to Texas and the checker flag falls in the Contender Series season. It's just, you never want to have to be in a position where you have to take the risk. Here's a look at the last lap, and you can see how this played out between Olan and Salas. He had 2 opportunities. I wondered whether or not we might see a big run into turns 1 and 2, but Salas set him up there and left it all to do in turns 3 and 4.
And I'll give Salas some credit. I don't want to sound like, oh, he just ran him over, he dumped him. If you're Femi Olan in this situation, you're on old tires, you can kind of open up the bottom and know that you're in a good points position too. These guys are really talented. Olan knew he was on old tires and elected to go down there to block. There's the situation where somebody may kind of use the bumper on you, and I think you could see that post-race. Olan didn't go up and show any displeasure or anything. He wasn't yelling at him on the radio or anything like that. I think he made the move to block. He got a little bit of a bumper from it, and he still nets a third-place run, so I don't think he could be too upset about it.
It is still a really, really good points night for Femi Olan. Salas, Luza, Olan, your top 3. We'll talk to them momentarily. Dylan Alt finished 4th. Taylor Hurst was 5th. Zach Novak was 6th. Caden Honeycutt 7th. Jonathan Delaney, Derek Bordeaux, and Colin Keister round out the top 10.
Big night there for Keister. Kwame Scott quietly having a spectacular season. He finishes 11th. Mercurio and Bowden raced their way forward all night long, 12th and 13th. Smallwood, we were watching along him, battling for 23rd. He ends up in 14th, Bias for 15th. Another great run for Kevin King. Again, we were talking about veteran experience, grinding it out. He ends up finishing in 16th and doing himself some good to hopefully put his Contender Series back on track. Good night for Kerner. Much needed night here for Justice. Briar LaPrade fell back to about 29th earlier. Musters a 19th, and Timmy Holmes hangs around for a top 20. That's where you want to finish on that part of the screen, not this part of the screen.
Ray Alfalo, 21st, Seth DeMerchant, 22nd, and Matthew Zwack finished 23rd. Max Brady ends up 24th this evening. A lot of Norse Force Racing represented here from 20th on. Agno Phillip, 25th. James Holzer, 26th. Daniel Falkingham, nice little fight back to get to 27th. Anthony Burrows fell off as the race progressed. He finishes 28th place. Crawford and Christopher Hill complete the top 30.
Back here in the 30s, a lot of difficult runs. Tinsley, unfortunately, couldn't make that strategy work. Doucette, we talked about his internet issues. And obviously, after his spin, he kind of nets about 6 or 7 positions. Tough night for Frisch and several of these back 8 or so that have had really, really difficult starts to their years. And McKissick, Helton, Buttafuoco, Brown, Rush, and Navarro. They're going to have to pull some rabbits out of the hat and really show up with kind of the same speed that we've seen this driver have in Vicente Salas as he goes back-to-back at Phoenix. And Vicente, I guess I'll just ask you about the move in Turn 3. You're in a great point situation, but going into Turn 3, obviously a little bit of contact there with Femi. Was that kind of the game plan the whole time there going down the back straightaway, what you were thinking?
Obviously I would have liked to have done it cleaner. I feel like I had to be a little rougher than I'd like to be. But at the end of the day, when you look at our car, how we ran that whole race and how it was about to be taken away from us due to somebody, self-spinning by themselves, any day of the week, I'm not losing that if I have the choice. So just to set the precedent right there, I'll race you clean, but when it comes down to it, don't expect me to roll over.
Certainly not going to be the case as it has been in these Xfinity Series cars every year that you've been running them. What are you hoping to prove to those teams that are at the next level? I mean, I know that you've had a good relationship with Williams Esports, but, there's something to be said that it's not just getting through the Contender Series. It's trying to showcase that you are the best option that's running in the Contender Series. Is that something that has kind of been on your mind here, making these moves and running multiple races like this?
Absolutely. That right there was to show all the teams out there that I'm willing to do what it takes to win, whatever's within reach. And just to put it out there right now on broadcast, I'm a free agent going into 2024. So really trying to solidify myself, I think already as a top free agent, but, hopefully being the number one free agent going into 2024. If you're a team looking for a driver, you can mark it on the virtual track, on the real racetrack, and off the racetrack. Hit me up. My Twitter is Vicente_Salas14. My Instagram is the same handle. Let's get to talking and hopefully put a pen to some paper.
All right, Vicente, we'll let you go celebrate it once again. I know you and your teammate Caden were very happy about this one. Congratulations, and don't think it'll be too much longer before we're calling you a Coke Series driver in 2024.
Thank you very much. And real quick, if I could thank everybody at SRI Performance for believing in me and letting me run their colors in this series. It's been awesome to bring home two wins for them. We're 2 for 2 with them on the car. Got to thank everybody at Miramar Financial, everybody at Dead Zone Racing, Houston, Dylan, Casey on my box, Platt for the spotting, Dave Siltman, Caden Honeycutt, everybody that works on these cars, and just everybody that supports me. It means the world to me, and I'm glad that we can, show out at this level and show what we're about.
Vicente Salas, your winner tonight at Phoenix, as we will toss things to James Pike, who I believe is standing by with somebody we've talked to multiple times already in the Contender Series this season, and Ryan Luza.
Ryan Luza, I don't even think that second place was on your radar immediately, just with the way that final restart came together. But just take us through your race. You had to fight a little bit through the pack to maintain the track position, and then everything cycled out well at the end. So how much of this was taking advantage of the opportunity ahead of you?
Yeah, really just getting everything I could on that restart. I was going to be happy with the 6th, right? We've had a really good start to the year. I was perfectly happy, even losing a couple of spots. But we were in the right place, right time, there again on the restart, and was able to come on P2 after, all that just craziness that's, of course, going to happen on a green-white checkered. Really upset with myself in Q trim. I probably had another half a tenth in it. Really should put on the pole. And then I ran the wrong steering ratio in the race. Practiced all week on a 12-1, and then I just loaded up the set without thinking about it and ran at 8-1. So that was tough. So yeah, I was happy just, P6, P7, wherever we ended up, and just, I want to say lucky, but it really was just kind of fortunate, right? Everything went right for us right there to get a P2. Just thanks to all the guys for the hard work. Really good car. Like I said, should have put it on pole. I think if we put it on pole, we never lose the lead there. But, can't complain.
A really, really big points night for a driver that's already had a pretty solid start to this season. Ryan Luza ends up P2 this evening, and it will be one more driver that we get the chance to chat with in just a few moments. Blake McCandless gets to speak with the other driver who was on the side of that battle for the race win, Femi Ola.
Well, Femi, I guess first off, I'll just kind of ask you about that race for the win with Vicente. What's kind of your thoughts on how that all played out?
To be honest, losing the win there, it change. The only thing that changes is extra points, right? But I kind of knew it was coming, but I didn't really know it was gonna happen. If you know what I mean. But I feel like it was a fair defense on my part. I feel like I moved first, so I didn't necessarily need to get driven through, but it honestly doesn't matter.
It didn't matter. You still got a good finish, but when was kind of that point in the race where you decided to make that strategy call? No, you didn't have the track position that you wanted, and clearly you look brilliant with the fact that it worked out, but what was kind of the thinking there early part of that run where you're kind of deciding whether you want to try to go for that strategy or not?
To be honest, shout out to Nathan Lyon and Stephen Wilson for being on the box. We kind of made that decision on the fly. I didn't really know what lap I wanted to pit, if I was going to pit with the rest of the field. And I ended up never pitting. And by that point, it was kind of too late to really pit and try to make up spots because passing was relatively tough once again. But, we made it on the fly, and there were a couple times where I saw a big pack of cars in front of me. They basically wrecked, but didn't fully wreck. And I was like, it's just my luck. This is the first time I'm actually staying out looking for the caution, meaning get the caution until, right on when I pit. And when the caution came out when I pit, I was like, of course. But, luckily, I think it was because I beat Vicente out, so I was able to pass everybody and take the lead.
Yeah, it was really close. I was looking at it, but it ends up working out for you. But Femi, you're back here looking to try to grind your way out. I know you haven't had the start to the year that you wanted, didn't have the Coke Series that you wanted here in 2023, but what's kind of the mindset looking forward here to Dover coming up next week?
I mean, to be honest, I was joking on the grid. I was like, we need a Q invert because apparently starting 30th or worse is the safe bet. Colin Bowden, he likes to bet a lot. So, me starting P30, 31, or 32, that's a safe bet. Honestly, I'm just going to try to avoid doing that next week. I think this is a really big result, in terms of points. So just try to qualify in the top 15 and, just hold serve.
All right, Femi, we'll let you go. Enjoy it. Congratulations on P3 tonight, and hopefully we'll be talking to you again soon.
Hopefully. Thank you.
Femi Olot right around the edge of the top 10 in points unofficially too. As we take a look at what that situation looks like exiting Phoenix, almost made it into the top 10. Femi, he will end up this night in 11th. Of course, this also includes the drop, so the worst finish for all these drivers is not accounted for in the final points. And when you take a look at that, I don't think that changes the story all that much at the top, Blake. Vicente Salas and Caden Honeycutt have been the class of the Contender Series so far.
Yeah, and this is with a drop, so they are in an incredible scenario. You got to think their lowest week is about 30 or 40, so they'll have that even if they wreck out next week. So sitting in a very, very good position. Golly, Falkingham really jumps off the page there just based off the runs he's had, but he is up there in 6th. As things stand right now, you can look at the rest of the top 20, but these are the drivers that are going to start getting a little bit desperate here. Hill, Frisch, Brady, Alfala, Kevin King did enough to keep themselves in the mix right now. But again, those drivers on the right-hand side of your screen, those are the ones who are really, really reeling right now. And honestly, James, I would say there's probably a handful or so. I'd say Buttafuoco on down. I don't want to say that you are out. I'd love for these drivers to go out there and prove me wrong, but they are in almost an insurmountable deficit at this point unless they go out and just win the next couple of weeks.
At 78-point gap represents almost 2 races worth of points. That's a tall, tall task for our defending Contender Series champion, Joey Brown, and everyone else down there. Meanwhile, the rest of the series, and everyone will turn their attention to the Lady in Black, Darlington Raceway, coming up, a special Halloween edition of the eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series at 8 o'clock p.m. Eastern. And we know that the Lady in Black certainly can be tough and can be wild and can be crazy. It can be a place too tough to tame. And Blake, I almost fear to think what we may see when we race at Darlington to close out spooky season, as it were.
Well, this is a race where certainly a lot of strategy can come in. Track position is going to be important, just as it was here tonight. But especially with these Xfinity Series cars, these guys are really able to get up on the wheel. We talked about the more forgiving car damage here. Allows these guys to run right up by the wall and not perhaps experience the same degree of a penalty as it would have last year. A lot of options here, especially in 3 and 4. And again, when I think about Coke Series drivers and being able to be amongst the best and the elite drivers in iRacing, Darlington's a track that I want to see themselves prove their driving talent set. So glad it's on the schedule and can't wait to see these guys wheel here in a week.
Darlington next week, then the College Series is back at Dover in 2 weeks' time. For our incredible team at iRacing, who brought you all the pictures and graphics and sound you saw in tonight's broadcast, and for my colleague in the booth, Blake McCandless, I am James Pike. Thank you so much for watching iRacing's broadcast of the eNASCAR Contender iRacing Series from Phoenix Raceway. Congratulations to Vicente Salas, winner for the 2nd time in 2023, and we will see you 1 week from tonight on Halloween, next Tuesday night from Darlington.